Welcome back to the JSOU Forum. Again, I'm your host, Doug Jordan. The topic for panel 3 this afternoon is strategic influence through the lens of Indo-PACOM. Moderating the panel is Dr. Arthur Tulak. Dr. Tulak is a member of the research faculty at Georgia Institute of Technology and supports the US Indo-PACOM Command in the J81 Joint Innovation and Experimentation Office. His research interests includes information and joint operations, deterrence, hybrid warfare, and theater strategy. He has assembled several staff representatives to describe the Indo-PACOM approach to influence in the AOR. Dr. Tulak, welcome to the forum. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Doug, for the introduction. And aloha and greetings from Camp Smith and also from Fort Shafter today. We're really pleased to be able to present the Indo-PACOM perspective and very much appreciate this opportunity to be a part of such an important professional development event. As the pamphlet for this symposium highlighted, our discussion should be focused on implementing our new national defense strategy, with a particular focus on how strategic competition is unfolding in the Indo-Pacific region, and with the goal of preventing competition from leading to state-on-state conflict. Now, SecDef Austin has consistently highlighted the importance of integrating our allies and partners in our deterrence concepts, our structures, and our efforts. Integrating the contributions of allies and partners into collective security was also a component of our 2019 Indo-Pacific strategy, in which the U.S. committed to reinforcing established alliances and partnerships while seeking to develop mutually beneficial cooperative frameworks to enhance collective security. Coordinating our deterrence efforts and operations with our allies and partners has the potential to reduce the costs of Chinese gray zone actions, coercion, and malign influence, and to reinforce and multiply the impact of individual nations' deterrence strategies. Now, former SecDef Mark Esper also stressed the value of allies and partners and provided guidance to the force on how to help coordinate ally and partner militaries' force development in order to build more capable future forces, which of course would provide visible contributions to our collective deterrence approach. Now, the 2022 US Indo-Pacific strategy builds on this and other previous frameworks and guidance to rely upon the collective capacity of allies and partners and their contributions for deterrence. Integrated deterrence requires investment in building collective capacity, nation by nation, with the resources that can support a coalition in a crisis. Interoperability also is a key component of the collective capacity we seek, and that directly supports our collective deterrence. The 2022 US Indo-Pacific strategy explains the US will work with allies and partners to deepen our interoperability and develop and deploy advanced warfighting capabilities as we support them in defending their citizens and their sovereign interests across the Indo-Pacific region. As allied and partner interoperability improves, it will factor into PRC decision calculus on whether or not to spark a war of their own choosing. Secretary Austin, in his remarks earlier this year, also emphasized the importance of working with a network of allies and partners to achieve integrated deterrence, saying that what was most important for the success of integrated deterrence is using the capability and capacity that is resident in our allies and partners, adding that allies can contribute to a favorable correlation of forces, and as they do, our adversaries, Communist China and Russia, would be forced to consider those contributions, those military contributions, before deciding on military aggression. Building partner capacity is one of the soft missions that was featured in all of the recommended reading for this symposium. And building partner capacity specifically for operations in the information environment is a major component of our panel discussion today. As the new Joint Pub 3-0 points out, all operations have an informational component, and management of that component can contribute to integrated deterrence. Building partner capacity for operations in the information environment has a deterrent effect on adversaries as it communicates their improved capacity, capability, and thereby changes adversary planning assumptions, and their assessed overall correlation of the forces and means that they face. Now, there are many ways to go about building partner capacity for operations in the information environment to support deterrence. In Indo-PACOM, and the component commands are engaged with allies and partners through many long-established exercise observation series, as well as bilateral and multilateral exercise participation. It's also accomplished via conferences such as the annual Information Operations and Electromagnetic Warfare Symposium hosted by USINDOPACOM and held for the last 11 years, as well as efforts to establish shared conceptual and procedural interoperability for ops in the information environment, like bilateral doctrine, multilateral SOP development efforts such as the multinational force SOP, and other bilateral efforts. Subject matter expert exchanges have also been a proven method for us to enhance a partner's skill set. Now, that's just an introduction of what we're going to be talking about. Our panel today is comprised of representatives from Indo-PACOM staff, U.S. Army Pacific, and Marine Forces Pacific. They will discuss some of these methods, successes achieved, as well as the challenges to getting this done right. So let me introduce our panel members. First, we have Lieutenant Colonel U.S. Army retired Jim Mishina, who serves as the Deputy of Informations Division for J39. Jim received his officer commission originally in military intelligence and then transitioned to PSYOP in 1999. As a PSYOP officer with the 4th POG, Jim had several deployments, including 2 to the Republic of the Philippines, first with JTF 510 and later with JSOU Philippines. 2008, he was assigned to the Special Operations Command as PSYOP branch chief, where he managed 6 MISS teams deployed throughout the region. In 2010, he then served in the MESO division of the Joint Staff, and in 2013, he began his civil service with U.S. Indo-Pacific Command in the J39. And Jim will be providing the theater level J39 perspective on those issues that I just talked about. Sitting next to Jim is Lieutenant Colonel retired U.S. Marine Corps Chris Perrine, who serves as the lead for the Indo-PACOM Communication Synchronization Team, and he runs our communication synchronization working groups on the battle rhythm. Now, prior to his current duties, he served 25 years in the Marine Corps, first as an armor officer and then later transitioning to public affairs with an assignment to Okinawa, Japan with the 3 MEF, followed by another assignment in the Pacific with duty at Marine Corps Base Kaneohe Bay as a media officer and PA. 2014, he completed a tour to OIF with 1 MEF forward, later served as in the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs in the Pentagon, where he conducted strategic communication planning in the Joint Communication Office with a focus on Asia-Pacific issues. He completed his combat tour in Afghanistan 2014 as the PAO for the MEB, Afghanistan, and the Regional Commands Southwest. Returned to 1 MEF, and then his final assignment as the Director of Communications Strategy and Operations from SORPAC, where he oversaw all of the communication efforts for the Marine Corps in the Indo-PACOM AOR. Chris is going to be focusing on the importance of strategic communication, build partner capacity with allies and partners in this specific focus area. Next is Colonel Jeremy Mushtare. He's going to be speaking to us from Fort Shafter. He serves as the Chief of Information Advantage, formerly known as the G39 at U.S. Army Pacific, or USARPAC. He received his commission from the Corps of Engineers and served with the 1st Infantry Division in Kosovo in 1999 as part of KFOR, then transitioned to infantry branch, then later completed PSYOP officer course, followed by many assignments with 4th POG from 2002 to 2011. Among these, a company command in 3rd PSYOP Battalion, detachment command in 5th PSYOP Battalion with a deployment to Afghanistan in support of a special mission unit, and another tour with the U.S. Embassy in Indonesia as part of a PACOM augmentation team. He held several battalion and task force staff jobs, including Director J3 Japotif in Qatar. Later served in the Pentagon and the Joint Staff and the J39, followed by battalion command in the 82nd Airborne, which included a deployment to Iraq. Now, more recently, he served at the Pentagon for the information operations in the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low Intensity Conflict, and as also the commander of the 8th POG at Fort Bragg before taking his position at USARPAC. Next, we have Mr. Robert Sholtis is the Deputy ACS G39 and G6 for MAR4PAC. He is sitting in one of these conference rooms. We're all up here in MAR4PAC next to Justin Bogue. Now, Bob began, his immediate previous position before coming here was the Secretary of Defense for Policy, where he served as a country director for China. So he's bringing a lot of the right expertise here. And in that role, he led the portfolios for artificial intelligence, legislative affairs, China trade, and economic portfolios. Spent 10 years leading Marine Corps Ground Forces Command and Control and Science and Technology section, developing the USMC C2 systems and application concepts. Bob also worked in defense industry as a CEO and an advisor. He served 15 years in the Marine Corps from 1991 to 2006, which included several tours in Operation Iraqi Freedom. And then we have Mr. Justin Bogue, who currently serves as the Maneuver Branch Deputy in the Information Environment Division, MAR4PAC. He was commissioned as an Army officer in December 96, completed tours in Afghanistan as an embedded training team leader in Nuristan Province, Afghanistan, and as a Brigade IO officer in Eastern Afghanistan and ISAF Joint Command Key Leader Engagements Chief. Additional assignments included Observer Controller and training conducting post, mobilization of U.S. Army National Guard and Reserve units deploying to Afghanistan. Served in headquarters U.S. Army Europe as an IO planner and was a member of the Army Forces Commanders Initiative Group. And after retirement, continued to serve in Afghanistan as a defense contractor, working as a special activities and IO planner. So that's our panel, and you can see they have a wide range of experience, both in this AOR and others, and they're going to be lending their expertise on what we are focused on in the Indo-PACOM AOR. So our first question to the panel is, how does your command contribute to strategic influence and integrated deterrence by, with, and through our allies and partners as directed by the National Defense Strategy of 2022? And starting off will be Mr. Jim Mishina.
Thanks, Art, and thanks to JSOU for having us. It's wonderful to share our experiences and thoughts here at the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. So I would offer that this headquarters and its components, whether or not they choose to recognize information, fully embody the spirit of Joint Publication 304, which recently came out, and that focuses on information. And really, what I'm talking about there is that not only is it commander's business, but it's also requires the efforts of the full staff and each of the components. And I think we do that. Just today, we were having a major engagement with one of our important partners here out in the theater, and we do that very frequently. But it's with an aim towards information sharing, building partner capacity, and starting to get after this collective nature that is talked about in some of the reading. Building and maintaining rapport with allies and partners is critical. And I'll get to some challenges later there, but we have found that our ability to reach out to them and harness their capabilities towards a collective action, it yields something that is in the mutual interest of creating regional stability out here. Information sharing is also critical, and that's classified, unclassified. It's allies and partners. It's interagency. Frequently, we found that in strategic competition, it's more often than not a little d or a little m, and a lot more of the D, I, and E. And so we've had to forge other relationships, interagency, who are all doing some great work out there with the theater to once again help our allies and partners accomplish things that are within their interests as well as ours. We have unlike a European command that has NATO and a whole bunch of policy and doctrine out there. This theater is a bit unique in that it doesn't have that kind of multinational headquarters and structure that's out there. So our our approach to this has been through a publication called the Multinational Force SOP. And quite frankly, it's a mechanism for us to standardize and warm up to the potentiality of actually doing multinational operations. And so what we've done is made every attempt to instill use of that MNF SOP as a basis for how we interoperate with one another. The competition, in my view, is mostly about consensus, because there really is no formal command relationship that's out there. But we find most frequently that those willing partners want to get after the problem and want to collaborate. And so it's competition through consensus, and in some instances, amplifying their voice as they go out there and do things in the theater that makes sense to promoting, the free and open Indo-Pacific. So I guess I'd stop there and then, go ahead with Chris, who's going to comment on strategic communication.
Thanks, Jim. So I help facilitate the command synchronization team's communication synchronization working group. So the purpose of the working group is to we develop communication plans, and we align our messaging efforts with higher, OSD, with interagency, across our staff, and with our subordinate commands. We also work with our partners and allies and help to educate and build capacity, and ultimately with some of our partners to develop communication plans and synchronize our efforts. I would put in a plug to say that communication planning should never be a separate effort, should never be in its own silo. It should be integrated in all of our planning efforts from the beginning. I participate in the crisis OPG, the competition OPG, the joint interagency coordination group, and a whole lot of other battle rhythm events. And communication planning should be involved in every OAI's planning from the beginning. I'd also say, before we can focus on partners and allies, we have to take a look at ourselves to make sure that our own policies, actions, words, and images are aligned. Sometimes that can be the hard part. We don't control particularly what Congress says or what the White House says, but we can make sure that we're aligned with our hires guidance. We can do our best to align with the interagency and ensure we're aligned within our combatant command. And also, I want to highlight the importance of actions, because communication is not just the words, the messages. We're talking with a partner a while back, an important ally had a problem with some of their elections because of an exercise that we had, and it had nothing to do with the message or the words that we communicated. It really had to do with location and scope of the exercise. And making sure that we are aligned, that our actions match our words, and also that we've coordinated in good faith with a partner and allies is extremely important. Also, we have to realize that our allies and partners have a lot of touch points with us. So one country is going to hear from the J2, the 3, the 4, the 6, from legal, from public affairs and MISO, from LNOs, from the defense attaches, and from embassies. We need to make sure that we're sending a consistent signal to them that we know what other aspects of our command is doing, what we're communicating, and make sure that we're communicating with a single voice, so that we're not confusing our partner or contradicting ourselves in any way. We also need to be clear on, moving on, we also need to listen to our partners. So sometimes we want to focus on messaging. Well, we want to tell them this, or we want them to do that. But the first thing, there's the difference in messaging and communication. With communication, you got to listen, you got to understand who you're communicating with, get the feedback, do assessments, and adjust as necessary. And it's really important, because we can't always apply US solutions when advising or building partner capacities. We have to adjust according to who they are, their culture, their history, their politics, their internal sensitivities. For instance, when I was in Iraq a number of years ago, I was advising the governor of Al-Anbar province, and some people wanted to put him on a radio station that we had started. And they've been pushing them and pushing them. And finally, I had a talk with them, and he said, listen, you know, we don't do this here. I don't go out and appeal to the people on radio. I travel around the province. I meet with the sheikhs. I meet with the imams, and we have counsel, and that's how we make decisions. And putting him on the radio station positions him as an American puppet. And he had already survived 19 assassination attempts. So understanding that and how that culture works is really critical in how we advise them. Also, here in the Indo-Pacific, especially in the culture of our context of competition, we have to realize, you know, we may want countries to align with us against a competitor, but we have to realize, you know, some countries, more than half their economy is tied to China. They may have significant Chinese ethnic populations and share culture and language. We can only expect so much from some of those countries. They may prefer us, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to, you know, publicly oppose China. And that's really important because we don't want to put them in a position where they feel like they're forced to choose. We also have to realize that our partners have different organizations. Maybe, you know, they have different laws and policies and authorities than we do, different limitations. Maybe they don't have a joint staff like we do. Maybe the joint staff's relationship is not the same with their M&D as ours is with the Department of Defense. One military service may completely dominate the others. I was working with one partner's Marine Corps, and we were trying to get some decisions made, and we couldn't figure out why we couldn't move forward on this. And finally, we realized, well, that Marine Corps really was completely dominated by the country's Navy, and the Navy would make that decision. And in order to get that decision, we had to go through Navy leadership, which we finally did. We also need to understand their missions, roles, and responsibilities. I was working with a partner just recently, and I did not realize that their wartime mission is completely different from their peacetime mission. I kind of assumed that it would be the same and it would be similar to ours. And when I found that out, it completely changed my approach as I was advising them. And we also need to understand what the partner thinks that they need and what they want, and try to make sure that we are addressing that rather than just pushing our own solution on them. So I think in the US, we bring a lot of experience, which our partners realize and they really value. You know, I was talking with a partner recently, and they said, well, you know, the US has fought in Iraq and Afghanistan, and you operate all over the world. We have so much to learn from you. So a lot of them really do want to learn, but we got to learn and teach them in a way that works for them. They probably know how to communicate really well, especially within their culture. But what we can do is we can help them learn to synchronize across the government. We can help the communicators get the voice that they need with their senior leadership. We can help them with research, planning, and assessing, and we can advocate for them with other government agencies. You'll probably hear that recently we participated in an exchange where we were working with a partner that their Ministry of National Defense and their Foreign Affairs Ministry really did not do any kind of communication coordination at all, which we found pretty surprising. And one of the goals that we had in that exchange was to bring them together, which we did, I think, very successfully. And even though we were together for an entire week, at the end of the week, we were going to do some senior leader engagement, and the Foreign Ministry was not going to participate, but through encouraging them all week long to participate, they finally did. And ironically, one of their main reasons to participate was to deliver a message to the Ministry of National Defense, which I think they did pretty effectively. But it seemed like the light came on for both ministries, and they both realized, you know what, we really need to start coordinating together. And so that's an effort that we'll continue with them as well. So at Indo-PACOM, we conduct exchanges, we provide training, we help to build capacity. In some cases, we have mature relationships with countries where we coordinate, we develop communication plans together, including addressing emerging issues and even crises. And sometimes it gets down to the point of saying, okay, we are both going to release this photo with this statement at this time on this platform. And that's to show that we are aligned and to make sure that we synchronize our efforts. And that sends a stronger signal to other countries when they see that alignment. We conduct briefings with senior leaders, particularly to help them to understand the importance of synchronization, to the importance of including planning at all stages, or communication at all stages of planning. to help give a voice to those communication advisors. We could conduct subject matter exchanges, like I mentioned earlier. We also conduct a few different bilateral communication synchronization working groups, some of which are very mature and get down to the level of coordination that I mentioned earlier. We've done 2 different trilateral communication synchronization working groups, one of which is pretty mature. And we're currently working on a 7-nation multilateral working group. It's in the early stages, but the idea is to take events or issues of common interest and to understand each other and to develop those messaging efforts. So that's kind of a snapshot of what we do at the CST, and I'll turn that back over to Dr. Tulak.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for really highlighting the importance of knowing your allies and partners. And then when you have that knowledge and understanding and relationships built, then you can actually achieve great things, like the example you gave about achieving interagency coordination where it was previously lacking. You don't start there, but that's where you can end up, that level of contribution. And that has a real impact on supporting integrated deterrence. So thank you, gentlemen. We're going to switch now over to U.S. Army Pacific, and Colonel Mushtare we're going to transition now from the Indo-PACOM to the component level view. So over to you, Jeremy.
Hey, aloha, good day. My thanks to Indo-PACOM and to JSOU for inviting me to be with everybody. A few things I want to talk about. I'll kind of paint the picture of our complement to U.S. Indo-PACOM's integrated deterrence in the region. So I'll talk from a USARPAC level and also from an information advantage looking forward kind of perspective. So first of all, for integrated deterrence, General Flynn would tell you that he thinks integrated deterrence consists of capability plus will plus posture plus messaging. All right, and so that's his lens for his complement to what we're doing in the Indo-Pacific. The way that we're doing that is through wargaming, warfighting, and campaigning. And I'll explain those to you. And I'll give you some perspective on what's transpired over the last year, which I think is pretty significant. So first of all, for anybody who recalls what was termed Pacific Pathways or Defender Pacific, where we've migrated to within U.S. Army Pacific is Operation Pathways. So how do you take all of those planned exercises that are out there, all of those events that you're doing, all those OAIs, and tie them together into a meaningful operation campaign plan? And that's what they've done out here. And so the point of that is when you think back on what integrated deterrence consists of, and we're talking about posture, and we're talking about will of partners, right? So the idea is, how do you get those forces postured forward west of the international date line, combat credible forces, at times and places where it matters, right? At times and places that involve risk. And that's how you're helping to solve some of these problems with the tyranny of distance in this theater. The idea that China has interior lines and we don't really. So the way that you create those interior lines is by having that posture forward. Some of the things that they've done here over the last year and a half, right? They established the 11th Airborne Division up in Alaska. So now you're sending a message out there about another combat credible force in the theater. They established the Joint Pacific Multinational Readiness Center. And the idea is that you have a hub here in Hawaii, you have a hub in Alaska, and then you have an exportable JPMRC capability that you can take out to partners and do joint and combined training. They also are looking at, bilateral is good, multilateral is better. And so where we've done exercises before, for instance, Garuda Shield with the Indonesians, this past year, truly a multinational exercise with 14 nations participating, right? And that's part of that will that we're showing. How are we demonstrating partner will? We're doing it through those exercises that they've signed on to with us. So for allies and partners, we'd say that's the counterweight. That's where we need to be, right? And there's a lot of talk about A2AD, and you're in this theater that's a Navy-centric theater. What is the land power component to what we're trying to bring? And this is from General Flynn, and I'll share this with you. says U.S. land power is a strategic variable that represents asymmetric advantages. It's survivable in conflicts where threat, anti-access, area denial networks are designed to counter joint force advantages in the air and maritime domains, and secondarily to deny, disrupt, and degrade in space and cyber. They're not designed to find, fix, or finish land forces that are distributed, mobile, lethal, and networked. In crisis, land power provides the joint force commander options. In campaigning, it can present targeting dilemmas that impose costs, undermine coercion, and complicate competitors' military preparations. So I think this is important to understand. What is the complement out here? And that's that ability to actually have that posture, to have those relationships, and to build that willpower. When we take a look at our own complement when it comes to the messaging side of things, and I'll make some assertions for your consideration toward the end of this, but when we say it's capability plus will plus posture plus messaging, that demonstrates that we as a component have the need to be in this influence space. We're doing the activities out there. And I think that this is a space where we have to recognize it's joint. All components need to be in the space who can be in the space. That's how we create mass. That's how we create market saturation. It's that kind of an approach that we have to take that I don't know that we've historically taken. And so that's important. What I would say in terms of our approach to messaging, and this is non-doctrinal, discussional, right? I see that the need to take what we signal and what we say, what we intentionally hide and what we intentionally deceive, and marry those things together. What is the story we're trying to tell? The other piece is, what are the layers? And I think that there's a lot that we do in terms of assuming that the layering is taking place between overt and clandestine, ACCM and SAPSTO and partner capabilities, but it comes down to priorities. The only way you can mask those effects and build those layers appropriately is to have the right priorities for your particular component or your particular organization. And I think that prioritization starts at the top. I think that that's what Indo-PACOM is doing right now, and I think that's very important for an AOR this size and this important. And then, some other considerations here. We talked about the jointness. More partnered is important. And we have a couple of LNOs here, right? We have a Korean LNO and a Japanese LNO. So we are constantly challenged to do not just REL 5I, but REL 5I, ROK, Japan, and it goes beyond that. So as we're writing plans, we have to be very cognizant of upfront about that, because it's difficult to share, and we have to be in the mode of sharing and of building these plans together. We have to be more targeted in our approach. And I think there's a sense that, for influence professionals, the idea that you're communicating to mass audiences, that's something that we probably need to take a look at. When is the right time to be doing mass audiences? And I would assert that that's more in warfare, because war changes the context. War changes the conditions and your ability to energize those mass audiences. And what I've asserted here with USARPAC is the idea you have to be more targeted, you have to be more discreet, you have to do more interagency in the approach. Because when you're really getting after competition, you have to be able to signal, you have to be able to say, but you also have to be able to put pressure and build the conditions in the right way. And so a more targeted approach, I think, is what's important. And then working interagency early, right? So the more that we bring the interagency partners in to the planning process, and it's easy to say, but it's important to execute. It's important to show that trust with interagency and to bring them in so that they have a piece of what you're doing, because it's increasingly whole of government and partnered in our approach. I think I'll go ahead and pause there, because I could go on and on about this, but those are the key takeaways. Over.
Well, thanks, Colonel. And I think you hit some really important points here about working with our allies and partners who are in our own headquarters and taking advantage of every opportunity to communicate transparently and clearly, looking at being more specific in our targeting as we engage allies and partners at the high level and the mass level audiences are in a crisis. And the peacetime competition, we're trying to get after that, helping them build those interagency coordination connections, even as we're doing it for ourselves. So a lot to unpack there. Very, very good. And we're going to go ahead and have the next component give their first initial answer to this same question. So we're going to switch over now to Marine Forces Pacific MARFORPAC, where we've got Bob Sholtis and Justin Bogue here just down the hall in the conference room. So gentlemen, over to you.
Aloha team, it's great to be here today. So it's no secret that the Marine Corps has undergone some significant change over the last few years. And so today we wanted to kind of start big and then drill down on how those changes were actually made for success in Indo-PACOM, and in part to assist in building that ally and partner capability and capacity that we're talking about. So coming out of OIF, the Marine Corps, we weren't manned, trained, nor equipped to meet the direction of the NDS. And so with force design, with a specific focus on being survivable and lethal in Indo-PACOM, co-located with our allies and partners, that was the mindset, and that's how we built the force. And so this force was purpose-built with input from MARFORPAC in support of Indo-PACOM. And so in accordance with the NDS at the service level, so the Marine Corps understands its role, in that it's to, in the South China Sea, assist our Navy brethren in providing freedom of navigation in the South China Sea. That's certainly a mission that our allies and partners are certainly interested in being successful. And then, maturing a stand-in force in the first island chain that is survivable and lethal, again, something that our allies and partners are interested in. And so to do that, our combined force must be able to sense, make sense, and act. Sense, develop those capabilities to sense the environment, and as Jim mentioned, methods to share appropriate information with our key allies and partners. To make sense, those expeditionary advanced bases with capabilities such as MAVEN, and that's to work with our joint force and partners and ensure interoperability. And so to be able to do that, to be able to act, to ensure C2 interoperability, to ensure delivery of effects within the joint force and with allies and partners. And we work with our network of allies and partners to do that. It's a continual process. So I think that message, that top-down messaging that we worked with our service to build, that has resonated with our allies and partners. They know that our stand-in force is going to be there during crisis. I think for them, it's easy to envision a scenario where in the first days of crisis, in the first island chain, that we have soft forces, we have submarines, and we have 1 and 3 MEF, and our trusted allies and partners. And so that's a team that we feel like we're constantly working to build in support of Indo-PACOM. And so we've begun to see some of those actions and those capabilities and those practices by the stand-in force have influence on those allies and partners, even in how they design their forces. So what does that mean to Marine Forces Pacific in support of Indo-PACOM? Well, so we have 2/3 of the Marine Corps combat power in direct support of Indo-PACOM in 1st and 3 MEF. And that provides a consistent, persistent presence. And as Jeremy said, when it matters, supported by continued exchanges throughout the year. So in other words, that force is there when it matters, and that we continue to build those relationships. And so, that force that was built and designed, it brings an ability to combine arms in electromagnetic spectrum, in space deterrence, in defensive and offensive cyber, and information operations. And so as we built that force and strategically located in, when it matters inside the 1st and 2nd island chain, that ultimately is what builds that ally and partner trust, mutual trust, and capability and capacity. And so I'll turn it over to Justin for some specific actions within the FIC.
Aloha, good morning, and thank you, Bob, and the rest of the team from Indo-PACOM and USARPAC. So just a couple of things I want to put Colonel Mushtare's comment on joint. The Marines here in the Pacific, we have maritime role, we have a land role, and we have an air role, and specifically on the 5th gen side. So the things we do with our allies and partners often transcend across multiple services. So we have to be able to speak a lot of different languages to do that. Highlight a couple of things with a key ally in the region. So we've worked with them. We now move one of our major OAIs that we do with them from the west coast of California out into the first island chain west of the international date line, which will not only send a message, but it enables their readiness at home. So messaging through action in that respect. Key leader engagements with that same ally and subject matter exchanges as they develop emerging capabilities, whether it be cyber or PSYOP or OPSEC or other information force related capabilities. Continue to engage at the service level and at the schoolhouse level to ask how we do and how they want to do and how we can better be interoperable with that key ally. I want to hone in a little bit on an exercise coming up here soon in April, Balakatan 23. So some of the things we're doing there for interoperability with another ally. So Balakatan 23 is probably MARFORPAC's keynote OAI that we are the Office of Coordinating Responsibility for our execution. And so we've injected capabilities. We're going to do a defensive cyber range as part of this. We'll have multiple partners from the Armed Forces of the Philippines, as well as other government agencies from the Philippine government participating alongside Marine cyber operators, Army cyber operators, and Air Force cyber operators from the U.S. side against a live OPFOR from U.S. Cyber Command as they work on tactics, techniques, and procedures and working together in the same room as they go after a common threat. Moving forward in Balakatan, increasing their IO capability or their information operations capability through in 24 an information warfare exercise where we sit down, collaboratively work together with multiple allies and partners in Balakatan to go through a scenario on how we better plan together, better execute together in the information space. And then we also work with other partners who don't necessarily have a military, but they're concerned about a free and open Indo-Pacific and how they combat illegal activity, how they protect their EEZ, and how we work with their law enforcement agencies to help better develop their capabilities and ensure their preservation of their EEZ and their food source in the Pacific here. And I'll pause there and turn it back over to Art.
Thank you, gentlemen. That was really good to talk about the actual presence. Colonel Mushtare mentioned posture. Where do we have our forces? And having them in the first and second island chain strategically deployed where it makes a difference, where their presence has meaning. That's important. It also helps with building those relationships that we talked about at the very beginning with Jim, and being able to develop the trust and confidence and learn more about what it is that they want to do and what they need to get from us. So the things that we're getting from our allies and partners is just as important as what we're being able to give to them. Also, thanks for highlighting Balakatan. It's an example of how the commander here is operationalizing the theater campaign plan through the campaign order to put the components in the lead for engagements with allies and partners. But as you pointed out, Justin, you can't just do it service to service. You have to be aware of all those things that any other component will be able to lend a hand. And I think the work that we've done with AFP, the AFP Cape Dev, is a perfect example. So we're going to go to the questions from the audience, and I've sent this out to all of our panel members. This one comes from the audience. Is there any condition that exists in another theater or another combat command AOR where Indo-PACOM or any of the components could take advantage? For example, would a theater send a partner country reps to an exercise deployment or other activity to demonstrate potential solutions to a shared or common or similar problem in another AOR?
So I don't know if you heard the question, but Dr. Tulak raised a question from the audience, and he said, is there an opportunity where Indo-PACOM would ask an ally to potentially go to another theater and demonstrate a capability or solution. So, kind of expanding on the question that was asked is, what are some innovative things that you're seeing, or what are opportunities out there that you see?
Yeah, I guess I would, I'll go ahead and start. I think that's actually happening real time. And I'm going to point to a couple of things. The first one is Korea, where, without a lot of nudging, they took it upon themselves to travel out to Europe to go visit NATO, and became a part of the cyber defense group. I think our allies and partners are watching the world just as much as we are. And there have been times when we have prompted on an event that we can have a discussion about in sort of free space that may not be as contentious as some of the issues that reside in the theater here. The other example is our work together with Australia, whereby we have gone to countries to present the image of how multinational operations work together and some of the planning factors that surround it. So Australia and the United States going with a small team out to a place like Malaysia or the Philippines to convey an exchange on humanitarian or counterterrorism things. All of that's in the spirit of establishing and maintaining and building upon the rapport and interoperability that we've been trying to get after. So I guess I'd pause there and see if anybody else has got any comments.
Yeah, I think, Jim, you bring up some good points. I think also there's a lot of partners interested in Ukraine right now, right? So there may be some things that develop over time where people want to go and visit EUCOM. That's certainly a potential. I think another good thing out there is Operation Gallant Phoenix. And certainly there's partners out here, but there's a lot of other folks who are not partnered with that, and that always serves as a good example of breaking down to the REL level across partners. And there's different models for that, and we certainly play a role, but that's a great model to be able to get folks out to. Over.
I would echo that on Ukraine, and this is a caveat. This is my opinion. I'm not speaking on Indo-PACOM policy, but there's a lot of international concern about Ukraine, and a lot of people have drawn parallels to Russian aggression, actually invasion against Ukraine, with PRC, coercion against Taiwan. Some Asia-Pacific, Indo-Pacific countries have increased ties with NATO countries. I'm not suggesting that NATO would be a military alliance for the Indo-Pacific, but I think that European countries are increasingly becoming concerned about China's challenge to the international rules-based order, as well as increasing coercion against Taiwan and against actually some other countries in the region. And I think that we would probably encourage facilitating increased connections and partnerships there.
Let's just ask MARFORPAC to be ready to jump in on that question. But just one of the observations following on Chris's remarks is that a lot of countries are trying to draw lessons learned from the Russo-Ukrainian war and shoehorn it into the circumstances that are out here. And it's really important as we're looking at our international messaging on that, that we're able to interpret what it means for our allies and partners. And that goes back to what Jim was talking about at the very beginning. Those relationships are key because that's our touch points to be able to hear their concerns. And we've seen that as that war has unfolded, that we get questions directly from our allies and partners who are stationed out here on the island. And it gives us an idea of what they're worried about. So MARFORPAC, anything to add?
Art, thank you. It's Mr. Bogue here. So just a couple of OAIs that we do here in the Pacific that touch multiple COCOMs, RIMPAC every other year, and PALS, the Pacific Amphibious Leaders Symposium, where we bring in concerned allies and partners from other COCOMs. So we do bring them in here. I would say other opportunities as we look at the competitive space and how we compete with the primary competitor here in this AOR, AFRICOM is probably a COCOM that we probably don't do enough with when you look at how much influence the PRC has in the African continent, and as they exploit the resources there. So how we can better work with AFRICOM and our, some of our key allies and partners here have a definite vested interest there. I know the Ukraine is the soup du jour, so to speak, right now, but I think as we look at the long game of competition, we've got to look at other places as well, not just in UCOM.
Okay, very good. So I think we still have time for more questions, and I want to relate another one that we've received from the audience, and it's a good one. It gets after the nature of this, or the strategic problem set, and how that impacts how we approach each ally and partner from the unique perspective. And here it is, the same idea has been mentioned throughout the afternoon, that we don't want to force a potential partner into a choice, and that sounds great. But partners want both U.S. security and at the same time the economic benefits of dealing with China, so access to Chinese market. And the question is, how does Indo-PACOM thread that condition as we engage with allies and partners to not force them into a us or them kind of choice, and continue to make progress in achieving the integrated deterrence? And I'll start with Indo-PACOM.
Thanks, Art. I think we face that very often in this theater, and I would suggest that there's empathy that we have to have with our allies and partners. In some cases, the major competitor is the top trading partner for these countries, and so without necessarily ignoring the problem, because I think there's a degree of that, engaging on the problem, and then understanding their perspectives on things, and listening to the suggestions that they have as to how we get after operations in the information environment. In some cases, they have unique subtle ways to register resistance while not totally upsetting the apple cart in terms of economy. That's my thoughts. Over.
Yeah, so I would say, a lot of times international relationships are not too different from one-on-one relationships. It's just a macro scale. And let's say, you're friends with John, but you hate Al. But John and Al are friends. You don't go to John and say, hey, John, I really hate Al. You should uninvite him from your birthday party. That's just really awkward, and that's going to hurt your relationship with John. So and we've seen studies that show that us pointing fingers too much at China can be counterproductive. That message can actually hurt us with a certain partner or ally. So really what we need to do is focus on being a faithful, reliable ally or partner. And be genuine about it. Do it because it's in our mutual interest, and sustain that relationship throughout the year and show them that what we do benefits them, and that we do want their security and their prosperity. That's the best thing that we can do. Now, we do a lot of information sharing as well. I mean, those countries, if you're Malaysia or the Philippines and you have contested waters, natural resources, islands with China, they already know that. They already know, the Philippines know that they get bullied by China. So we don't really need to tell them those things, but we can share with them a lot of information, declassified intelligence. We can share legal aids that we have that can help expose some things that maybe they don't get to see. And those are some maybe more discreet ways that we can share information with partners and allies to help them understand a little bit better, hey, what is China actually doing that is harmful to their interests? But that needs to be done in the appropriate context by the right people. And really, for the most part, we just need to be a strong ally or partner.
So from MAR4PAC, Bob Sholtis here. I'll hop in on this real quick. And a lot of this is from my last role that I had at OSD China Policy. And so it's certainly not current today China policy, but what I tried to do there wasn't the who they were trading with, it was the what. It was like, did it lead to civ mill fusion for the CCP or PLA? And so in working, just as my Indo-PACOM brethren mentioned, working to ensure that they understood the second and third order effects, and then to do our best to be the good partner now from our 4PAC perspective is what engineering projects can we do? What can we offer? What can we offer our allies and partners and capabilities that we have resident within to show them that we're there, persistent, consistent, and always going to be there, and yeah, not worry about the trade piece as much. Over.
USARPAC, anything to add?
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with what's been said. I think part of it is, there's certainly a lot of non-aligned countries out there, and that's their prerogative. I think the big thing for us is the reliable, credible partnership that we have and demonstrating that and highlighting it. And then when the time is right, and this is partner country dependent, the partner needs to understand where they're being negatively impacted, right? There's the realities of PRC economic predatory behaviors. There's the realities of losing privacy, the realities of losing your own port access, extraterritoriality, the idea that some of these nations might actually be mortgaging their future and aren't really thinking that through. And I think that's, the empathy is good, the credible, reliable force is good. And then some of them, this is a whole government problem, but they just have to have that understanding. And many of them won't, but it's not zero sum. Our involvement in these countries is not zero sum with PRC. It has to come down to what are those actual coercive, predatory behaviors that are negatively impacting, the free and open Indo-Pacific, first and foremost. And then helping these countries with their sovereignty, where their sovereignty is at risk of being undermined. Over.
Yeah, very good. I think you hit on some key points that, again, go back to our original construct, that sustaining relationships with our allies and partners is important. And if it's important, then it should be resourced. And one of the constraints that we have is how much money and time on the calendar we have for that, with all the other things that we're competing to do. You can't achieve this level of nuanced relationships and deep communications with allies and partners unless it's perceived as important. We know it's in our doctrine, build partner capacity with allies and partners. How do we actually make sure that we can resource ourselves to do that to the level and standard that we want? And that's all the time that we have for our session today. And just want to express our thanks for US Indo-PACOM, Marine Forces Pacific, and US Army Pacific for allowing us to be a part of this great professional development event. And we hope to be able to do this again in the future. So Doug, Jordan, back to you. Thank you very much.
Well, on behalf of JSOU, we'd like to thank everyone out in Indo-PACOM for taking the time to participate. We know that you have a lot going on this week, and to put together such a great panel. The other thing is, just to reemphasize, there's a lot going on with the Marine Corps. So having Army Pacific and MAR4PAC come in, I think it was a great opportunity. So this brings us, our third panel, to a close and completes our objectives for today. Thanks again to Dr. Arthur Tulak, who we just spoke with, as our moderator, and to each of our panelists from Indo-PACOM for taking the time to talk to us.